Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening from, and welcome to 1% Better, where we take a look at hidden stories in sport. I'm Zylan Fnack, and I'm joined by Dr. David Lipman. Your medical question today is, what is the most mobile joint in the human body?
They're going to say shoulder, I think.
Correct. Is that a throwback to Helen O'Berry last week? We discussed that briefly, wild arm swings.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's certainly a thing. I mean, ironically, the shoulder is actually not one joint. It's actually four joints. It's a shoulder joint complex, right? So most people think of the glenohumeral joint as a shoulder joint, but there's actually the sternoclavicular joint. So where your collarbone joins your sternum in the front here is the acromioclavicular joint, the AC joint that a lot of contact sporting injuries come from. So that's where the collarbone joins the acromion process of your shoulder blade. And then there's the scapulo something where it joins basically the back because your scapula moves, and then there's the glenohumeral joint. So it's a complex that works together, but it's a lot more technical than just a ball and socket as well.
Well done, man. For new listeners who might not know, we are supported by Precision Fuel and Hydration on this podcast, absolutely best in the business. A couple of weeks ago, we had one of their athletes on here, Rachel Entrican, to talk about Cocodona 250. We are going to have an update on that because that race is going on as we are recording. Did she have a new product there that she was trying out?
Yeah, so we got worded up about this and we couldn't talk about it on the podcast, or we weren't sure we could, so we didn't. But they have dropped a watermelon chew, which is debuting at Cocodona. It's being tested on the ground. Everybody says it's amazing. And I think it goes live later this year. I'm not sure exactly when, but it is being tested there. She did the marketing with them for that and said it was great fun. She said to us offline, we had a big chat to her, and she said, yeah, it was really good fun to get out to the UK and do that with them. So it was really cool. Really fun. So if you do want to be like Rachel, if you do, I actually had someone reach out to me the other day going like, hey, I'm running a half marathon. Should I use gels? And I was like, yes. And they're like, what's gels? And I sent them our precision discount code, which is better, all capital letters, 2026. But I also shared the fuel and hydration planner with her. And I said, hey, this will answer your questions for you. But the short answer is yes, you should be using gels. Or something else, right? It doesn't have to be gels, it can be chews, can be whatever. But you should probably take some carbohydrates. This will help you with at least allaying some of your anxiety around what to do. It'll give you a bit of a structure and a bit of a plan. So we do have a link to that fuel and hydration planner in our show notes. So please do hop down there, follow that, go check out Precision. If you do buy your first order, we'll have a 15% discount if you use our code or if you follow that link.
How's your running going? I knew you were bad at maths, but you proved it again with a run this week. You were telling me on the weekend.
No. I wasn't bad with maths. Coros is bad with a map. So this could be GPS error, but it more likely is a true, I don't know what happened, but I mapped this route that I was running because I didn't want to run too far with TGJ, who would have been running with a friend of mine, an old friend of mine. And I map it and it's like 19 Ks. I'm like, yeah, we're good here. 2 Ks to him. We'll do about, 10 miles, 16 Ks, like happy days. I'm happy. And we get to like well away from where we have to finish the run. And I'm like, we're at distance now. So anyway, I ended up running closer to 21 Ks. But good news, Achilles has seemed to hold up pretty well, which is really, really good. Really happy about that. Interestingly, and I saw this today, he mentioned to me, we were talking about the 2-hour marathon and, he listens to the pod and he said he applied for the marathon, London, after, having watched it. And I said, okay. And I found out today he has a 1 in 1,338,544 chance of being selected. Well, it's not really one; it's 60 in that, right? Because it's 60,000 in that because he's one of 60,000. But that's how many people have applied. So if he's got if he's one of the 60, I mean, if you're 60,000 people out of that, gives you about a 4.5% chance. And if they go to the double day, which they're talking about, they're doing a potentially Saturday, Sunday, that might be a 9% chance there. So that's quite interesting to see. I mean, that's higher than I thought. It's not great, but it's higher than I thought.
I reckon Sebastian Sawe breaking the 2-hour barrier there for the first time, and Kujalcha, give him a shout out as well. 2 people did it.
Yep.
I reckon that has done wonders for their marketing. Obviously, that went everywhere. Like, it was insane. London Marathon could not be happier. I reckon the event's going to be so popular now.
Well, I mean, it's already the world's biggest. It was the world's biggest anyway. So they were not limited by the number of applicants. They were limited by the number of spots. Hence, they're talking about the second day. It's probably it's definitely top couple in terms of popularity because of its reputation, people like visiting London, etc. It's very popular locally. Like everyone's applying for it regularly. There's lots of, it's a much less elite marathon in terms of culture. There's a lot of charity running, and it's a very common thing here. So I think that helps increase the number of applicants as well. Because, like in Berlin, there's a bit more of a you kind of got to go to yes, people don't run as fast, but there's is less of this charity runner sort of vibe. So I wonder if that changes the perceived accessibility of it. But yeah, certainly, I think that anybody seeing that was like, cool, I want to run a marathon or whatever, right? So I don't think it's hurt them. I think it may have bolstered their chances of getting that sub-elite runner, that sort of tier away from either that, not quite 2 hours, but maybe 2:20 to, let's say 2:45 females down to 2:30 to 2:25 females. And certainly in that sort of 2:20 to 2:15 guy, I think there's probably quite a few of them who are now oh, it's actually not so slow. I can run fast there, so maybe I will. So if they can get entries, I think maybe there's a few more there, people who are looking for a fast course.
Slightly off topic. We didn't talk about this last week, but did you see what Nike did at the race? Obviously, it's a New Balance race. It's supported by New Balance. But I think Nike had a barge with a big billboard of this go under, is it the London Bridge?
Yeah, the Tower Bridge.
Is it Tower Bridge? Yeah, at the time, and it obviously got captured on video and film, etc. Yeah. So it's almost free marketing for them.
I think we talked about this last year. I think they put one so that if you carry on along the Thames towards the finish line, it's only a handful of kilometers. I can't remember exactly how long it is. It's probably 7 kilometers, 8 kilometers towards near the finish line there. I think it was there last year we talked about it. So I think they do this every year. Why wouldn't you? I mean, it's pretty common. I remember in Berlin on the course, there was a big billboard. As you turn one corner, it was a Nike billboard. So they all do this, right? They all buy this stuff. Yeah, fair enough. If you get on the broadcast, I mean, the barge and the broadcast is very different to if you're there in local stuff. So, it is what it is.
I know Nike in particular do this. I noticed it at Cape Town Marathon. Adidas is the sponsor there. And the moment I landed at Cape Town Airport, I started seeing Nike billboards everywhere, from the airport all the way to Sea Point where the race takes place. And I was like, oh, I see what's going on here. Very smart, very way to get yourself into the conversation.
Different way to spend the money, right?
Yeah, exactly. We are supported by Stride running power meters on this podcast. By the way, did I tell you I put on my Stride power meters, finally got around to it. I was surprised at how quick it took me. 5 minutes, popped them on the shoes, got set up on the app, but asked if I wanted the data on my watch, managed to get the data on my watch. Super easy. I'm very, very impressed, man.
Yeah, that's kind of why I was like, have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? Because I knew it wasn't a lot. There's a perception that it might be, but I 100% agree that it isn't. Interestingly, I shared here in the document, if you have a look there, I shared my leg spring stiffness. Now, the data in general is a little bit all over the place just because of there's a lot of things that impact this to some degree, and it will change to some degree based on shoes and that sort of stuff. But you can even tell there's a trend line there, and even you can see that it's trending upwards, which is a good thing for me, which says to me that my Achilles rehab is going really well. So I've been keeping an eye on this. This is easy running only, so it's the same pace basically, and you can see my leg spring stiffness is trending upwards, which I think is great. It's I'm excited by this. You can see this morning's value, which is quite high. I was feeling particularly poppy this morning, but it's cool to see this go up and be on the improve.
If you'd like to check out Stride, we have a link in the show notes down below, so go and have a look at them. I am deep into my rehab, almost 4 months post L5S1 spinal fusion surgery now, so I'm really interested to get walking with these pods and see what changes there are. You reading this data is such interesting insight that you can pick that up. With regards to your Achilles, man. So interesting. So I'd highly recommend you checking out Stride. Let's get to some community shout outs. Let's see what people in this community have been up to. If you haven't joined our Strava group yet, do so now. 1% better. It's only getting better every single week with listeners posting memes there now. I don't know what we've started, where this is coming from, but I'm here for it. I am loving it. And so are you, judging by the big grin on your face.
Yeah, and then also some like legitimate discussion there as well. John Burchett Sharp, just before we got on here, I was conversing with him there, talking about the London Marathon footage and different ways to watch it and that sort of stuff. So it's certainly a place. I know there's been lots of talk to us, with us, etc., about like, can we have a forum of some sort of Discord or whatever? It's like, it's a no for us at the moment. It's a lot to manage, and we're at a bit of our capacity at the moment between producing and editing and doing social for the pod. So that answer's a no at the moment because we want to do it well, but perhaps in a little while. But at the moment, Strava is functioning as such. So if you are there, then do jump on and engage there.
Speaking of John Burchett Sharp, shout out to him. He came fourth actually in his age group at the Chorley 10K. What else has other people been up to?
Yeah, so we had Christian Ronsolt, who ran 15:23 at the Strandveien 5K, which is lightning. So great work there, Christian. Kevin Mooney ran the Great Limerick Half Marathon in 1:25.
Jake Seckman ran 1:32 at the Lincoln Half Marathon, finding his way into the Pain Cave. Also, shout out to Nicola Garrido, ran 2:12 in her half marathon.
And we had previous guest host Dan Squires, your arch nemesis, did a long run, driving the 2:45 bus in the Belfast Marathon. So congratulations to him. And then Jack Farlow, who's a professional CrossFit athlete who listens to the pod religiously and actually finds you funny, Zylan, which is a bit awkward. But I did have a coffee with him the other week. And what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say he's got amazing arms. I love his profile picture. Those biceps, man, to die for.
Oh, So I went and met him for a coffee in person, and I was like, "Oh wow, okay, yeah, we aren't the same." So he's a big lad, but he came 8th in the London event of the World Fitness Project. So congratulations there, Jack.
Shout out to Vasily Pierre ran 32:52 in the Kazan Marathon 10K. Also, Lyle Rockman ran 44:50 in the Correctional Services 10K. Apparently, he saw his breakfast again there, judging by the Strava comments.
Yeah, yep. And previous guest, Michael Nidonitsky, he won the over 35s in the Adelaide State 10K Championships. So he ran 33:32 there. So unsurprising, he won the over 35s. That is just a quick time. But I'm sure he was happy to take the win. I'm probably not so happy about being a veteran as I am, but these things happen.
And then we got called out on Instagram by Clement Suligoch. I hope that's how you say your name. He was saying, what do I have to do to get a shout out on the podcast? I said to him, well, run a sub 2-hour marathon and for sure you'll get a shout out on the podcast. But actually we went and looked and your Strava is private, so we can't see your workouts on Strava in our group to shout you out. So sort that out, Clement, and we'll give you a shout out anytime, man.
Or don't, which is reasonable to not for privacy reasons, but then we can't shout you out, unfortunately. It's kind of because I was actually like, oh no, we should definitely go check. And I went and looked in our Strava group and I was like, oh, he's a member. And then I said to you, he's not a member, or I thought to myself, he's not a member because I had never seen anything from him. And then I went and looked, I was like, oh no, he's a member. And then I clicked in and I was like, oh, private. So yeah, can't see that, unfortunately. So yeah.
I'm loving the comments we're getting on Spotify. They are there every single week now. Heather said, maybe David needs to start quizzing Zylan weekly on his cycling knowledge so that we can know he is an actual cycling head. Love that.
Yeah, well, it's tempting. It's that would remove the only bit of work you do for the episode, though. So I decided against. I decided against it.
What would you ask me? What kind of questions? Let me see if I'd agree to it or not.
Oh, you don't get to decide what kind of questions, mate. That's the thing. Welcome. Like, this is the problem I have. I'm like, what questions are you going to ask me today? It could be anything. So, I'd ask all sorts of stuff.
If you ask me who won the Tour de France in 1954, I'm not interested. But if you ask me who's going to win the Tour de France this year, or who is the new up-and-coming rider, or, I don't know.
Both of those answers are easy, mate.
We got a comment as well from DJ at Work. That is Abalang. He says, awesome episode, guys. Congratulations on your new puppy's eye. Great to hear that Dave is back to running a bit quicker again. On the point of Sawe's next move, I think he'll forever be remembered as the official sub-2 marathoner. If I were him, I'd do as Dave suggested and win all the majors, including Cape Town and Shanghai, and have that in the record books. A 2028 Olympic marathon win would also cement him as the GOAT. So now he just needs to avoid Yamov, Jakob, and John, because those guys could take him.
Well, there's two ways to think about this. Firstly, generally elite athletes want to race the best. And I think that, as we talked about last week, the competition is part of what made him run so fast. So I think there's those things, right? Is like maybe you don't want to dodge those people. The bigger factor in whether they line up against each other, I mean, maybe the Olympics is one exception, but will just be appearance fees, right? So they're going to want to take appearance fees, and London's not going to pay them all to turn up. Boston will be able to steal some away, so it'll forever be a bit of a split field in that respect. It's also like I don't think you can just go and win them all. There's this thought, and I made the same point. Is like just turning up doesn't guarantee you a win. So we're used to seeing that with Eliud Kipchoge, but that is we talked about Poggy last week, and you sort of being a bit fed up with him winning everything. Like it can get a bit like this of like just assuming these people are going to win, but actually it's not so easy. So I agree
Respect
from
to
a
them.
legacy standpoint. Yeah, from a legacy standpoint, you certainly, if you could win all the marathon majors and win the Olympics, that's kind of how you set yourself apart from Eliud. There's no question, but you've got to win a lot of marathons. Like if let's say Sawe goes to each major marathon from now on, wins them all and wins Tokyo, right? In that order, and then retires. He will certainly be seen as the guy who never lost a marathon, which will be a huge thing in his favor. But there will forever be people who say Kipchoge was better because he ran under 2 hours first, even though it wasn't an official race. And the other argument they're going to put forward is that he did it for longer and he won more races. So there's always this argument, and we've had a former colleague who used to say this, like the GOAT debates, the problem with it is people argue different things. Some people are arguing about peak, how good they were at their peak. Some people are arguing about their sort of actual longevity. Some people are talking about championships. Some people will talk about impact. So there's lots of factors that come in when people are arguing. So people are kind of arguing often apples and oranges rather than fruit. So it's quite an interesting thought here. But certainly, like if you look at Kipchoge's palmares, to use a cycling term, he won a lot of marathons for a long time, was undefeated, right? So yes, we sort of remember him as he kind of is these days, where he's kind of fading into the background a little bit. But yeah, that I also don't buy into the fact that you can do more and therefore detract from your legacy. So him going and running now, or not doing as well at Boston, shouldn't detract from his actual achievements.
I've got a boys WhatsApp group, and I get very frustrated because firstly, they don't know what it takes to be the best at anything for the longest. Like as you say, Kipchoge, Tadej Pogacar, it's like a given they're going to win. But kudos to them. Like not anyone can do that. So respect to them for achieving that. And then secondly, the boys group always gets rude towards these athletes when they stop winning the older they get. Like they're going to keep winning till they're 100. Like they can outrun Father Time. So I get so frustrated with regards to that.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
Yeah. Last comment on Spotify is from Nick Economides. Sorry. He says, I could have sworn that just a couple of episodes ago, Zylan said we're getting close to a sub 2 hour marathon and David dismissed him. Yet I heard no gloating here. Did I imagine the whole thing? Did he imagine it? Did I say that?
No, so we were talking about in Boston, we were talking about, you said, we're getting close. When you talked about John Correa running 2:01, and I said at the time, 2:01 with a tailwind at Boston isn't sub 2 hours, and I don't think, and he won by quite a bit. So I said, I don't think everybody's marching towards that. 6 days later, I looked like an idiot. But thankfully, 6 months earlier, I looked like a genius.
Yeah, you called it in October last year. Yeah,
yeah, but I do think, and I saw Stephen Scullion talking on a podcast, and was asked, would anyone break? And for those who don't know, Stephen Scullion ran like 2:09. He's an Irish marathoner, big on social media now. And he sort of said, no, not everyone's going to keep breaking 2 hours because there are so many factors that go into it. And 2 hours itself requires a bunch of stuff. Now, I think I think the point I made last week, the delineation I made is potential versus execution. These guys have all got, like, undeniably, we have 2 guys at least, probably more like 4, who have the potential and physiologically could run under 2 hours on the perfect day in perfect conditions. The question is, how many times is lightning going to strike? And or what is their actual potential? Because if it's if it's 159, everything has to go perfectly. But if the potential is 155, we're going to see a bunch of sub 2s. So the optimist in me says that Kajelcha, Kiplimo, and Sawe, and then to a lesser degree Korea, it's more the others, are so early in their marathon journey that there's so much meat left on the bone for them of just, even if they're just doing if they keep doing the same thing, just rinse and repeat, they will get better just by virtue of like years and experience. Now, that improvement is going to be less for them than it would be for you or I because they've done so much more running before they debuted. But nonetheless, there is a lot of meat on that bone potentially for them. But again, they're going to need lightning to strike. They're going to need, I think they need competition to some degree, unless they're that much better. And again, courses and weather and all that stuff. So, and then again, there's a huge component of luck here. Are you injury free or not? Can you maintain being injury free or not, despite the fact that Sawe was injured in December?
Exciting times, man. Let's see how we go. What I like about this is we've talked for a long time about how running needs heroes, it needs characters we can connect to, and it seems like we know a lot about these guys coming through now. So long may that continue. It'd be good for the sport.
I think three of those four. It's a really good point about three of those four. Yomif Kajalcha's English is exceptional. He spent a bunch of time in the US. Korea's English is very good as well, and he's got this like great history where he fell last year at Boston, and then he's got his brother that won. And I think Sebastian Sawe is getting there as well. So I think you're right. The personalities seem to be coming through more than perhaps Evans Chibet, for instance.
Yeah, no, true. Thanks for all those interacting on social who've joined our Strava club. Sorry, I have to cough. Apologies, I'm going to pause my microphone. I just can't shake this cough, man. You didn't hear it because I paused a microphone because I'm a professional, but excuse my groggy voice. If you haven't joined our Strava group, do so. We are under 1% better. And if your privacy settings are high, unfortunately, we can't see your activity, so we can't shout you out. But obviously, you reserve the right to have that. Right. We do have a guest coming up on this episode. You chatted to Melissa Muzeau. What was that chat about?
So Melissa is the researcher who I was a research participant for a couple of years ago in Chamonix that we talked about, but she's doing a lot on what is called affect. The way to think about this is kind of emotions. So how we respond emotionally to hard exercise, basically, and whether it basically, without ruining the interview, some people seem to enjoy this kind of sick, twisted mentality a little bit. And some people seem to really not enjoy that, perhaps. So it's quite interesting talking about that. Can we use this to identify talent? She's also, her PhD is co-funded with On Running. Hence, I was testing shoes with her. And so there's lots of interactions of how we feel with the shoe and aspects there and what that comes into performance for as well. So yes, please do stay tuned for that with Melissa. She's very, sort of giving with her time. We really appreciate it.
That is coming up later in this episode. First, let's have a look at what's come across my desk. Some quick bits first. Cocodona 250 update at the time of recording, which is a Tuesday afternoon, about 25 hours after the race started. What was happening? I know you've been spamming me with amazing update stories, reels, which I really enjoyed seeing.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, it's just cool when it's quite hard, right? This going across Arizona, so the actual coverage is what it is, and it's pretty good. I'm pretty impressed by what they're doing there. But it's more interesting to see the social stuff that comes out of it because you get these great snips. So like we talked to Rachel about petting dogs, and then I shared a video with you of her running along and petting a dog, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. So so at the moment, this is crazy. I checked the list just before. So Rachel's in first overall, leading by about 3 miles /5 Ks at around halfway. Then and she was ahead of Dan Green's record. The last update I saw was at the 100-mile mark, right? So she's at roughly 125 miles now. Or beyond that. But at the 100-mile mark, she was 25 minutes ahead of Dan Green's course record from last year. So that's pretty impressive. So anyway, she also said to us, she wanted to run the second half better, which is scary for her competition and certainly the record if that's the case, right? In second is Killian Korth. He is the first man, obviously. Heather Jackson is third overall, second female. Joe McConaughey is fourth overall, second male. And then running together, at least from what I can tell from the tracker, Cody Paskin is fifth overall, third male, and Courtney DeWalter is sixth overall, third female. And they're about 9 miles back from Rachel. So that's pretty crazy to think the top 6 are 3 men and 3 women. I know Rachel was talking about having women on the podium, and I said, oh, yeah, it's coming this year. And, let's see. Maybe I'll look again smart. Yeah, it's cool to see that, though. She's in great spirits from what I've seen. I also noticed, and we're going to talk a bit about basketball later, there's one aspect where they have to take, like, I think they're running past a basketball court and they're asked to shoot a shot. I don't know if anyone made it, but I think it's just a cool bit of, like, that's such an ultra marathon thing to do. I love it.
I love that she petted a dog, that Rachel had time to pet a dog. She's in the lead because up front in our interview with we asked her, dogs or cats? So if you haven't listened to that Rachel interview yet, go and yeah, it was a couple of episodes ago. We both watched the World Relay Championships in Botswana over the weekend. What did you think? What went down?
First thing I thought was like, what a vibe. Just such good vibes in Botswana. There was an aspect of like they all had umbrellas for the sun and they're all spinning the umbrellas and stuff. I was like, it's just something, man. Africa does it different.
The atmosphere is just different in Africa. If that was Switzerland, you'd have a different vibe. We were watching, that's what my wife was saying. And she actually said to me, we should go to this. And it came out of nowhere. I was like, why do you want to go to Botswana? Where's this coming from? Anyway, we got a new puppy. We're doing renovations at the house. She's traveling for work. We couldn't go. But when we saw that atmosphere, she was like, see, this is why I wanted to go.
Yeah, it was super cool. It was also cool to see. I mean, the Africans do quite well there. And this speaks to everyone seems to do better a little bit closer to home. And it's something I was certainly talking to a friend of mine, called him this morning, wishing him a happy birthday. We were talking about, he was like, he wanted to come to Europe to watch some track and field. And he's like, it's different over there. I was like, there is a huge component of people performing locally. And it's quite interesting to think about that. Like, the Americans don't perform so well outside of America compared to at home, and vice versa, Europe and etc. So yeah, there's something to be said here. It's quite, when we think about performance. But anyway, the relays are just great. I just love watching relays. I've always loved it. I just think they one of the purest forms of racing. There's a bit of a level field because there's so much teamwork involved and those sort of things. So I thought that was really cool. So just for context for people, qualifications are up for grabs. In the mixed 4x1 and 4x4, where they have 2 men and 2 women, there's the Ultimate Champs this year. So you could qualify for that. But everybody else was only trying to qualify for the Beijing World Championships next year. So that was the men's and women's 4x1s and 4x4s. If you qualify for the Ultimate Champs in the mixed 4x1 or 4x4, you also qualify for Beijing next year. Also, the winners of this meet, the World Relays, won 40K. So there was quite a bit on the line and people doing quite well. But there was a lot of racing. There was basically you basically raced 3 times. At least twice. You raced at least twice per event. And some people did multiple events. I texted you about the one South African lady who was running twice a day on both days. Anyway, she would have been cooked at the end of it. And there was certainly Leclerc, I think the Canadian runner was doing something similar, running multiples. But that got me thinking, as always, how would you change training as a result of that? Like, what would you do in training to prepare for it psychologically, emotionally, and those sort of things? So, and there's, I'm sure there's some things we could talk about there, but
surely you just double your training load. If you're racing double twice in one day, you just double your training load. Whatever you did in 3 months, just double it.
Sounds good, Lionel.
Is that a math? It's good maths, right?
Sounds good, Lionel Sanders. No. So, no, it's more about how you would emulate that. So you would do maximal of the both events at a similar timing cadence is how I would think about starting to prep for it. So you would do your training load, whatever. And these people can certainly do a good job, right? And the theory here is 90% or an 85% second run from this person is better than the next option we have, or we can't afford to send somebody else, right? Like, so all those things are real.
Available, which is, if you're asking me about South Africa, there was probably no one else available, which is why she ran twice in one day.
Well, it wasn't just South Africa I'm thinking about Canada and all sorts of other things as well. So I'm not just thinking about her, but you've made a good point here, is that there are other constraints here to think about. But you could certainly then like get people used to that feeling as well, so they're not so worried about it. But the compressed schedule was pretty clear. Like, people are doing hamstrings quite often. I saw probably 3 or 4 across the 2 days, which is quite a lot to think about. So yeah. I also noted Australia were the only country to qualify for all 6 events to next year's World Champs. So that was pretty impressive. Speaks to Australia's like culture around relays and the coaching and the willingness to do that. So that was cool. The men's 4x4 was the last race of the day, the final. That is by far the best relay I've ever seen. Close second was a women's 4x4 from the Paris Olympics, where Femke Bol ran that lady down. She was about 10 meters back, but this was something else. Did you watch it in the end or not? You're about to die over there.
I'm struggling with this cough, man. Sorry. I did watch it. Are you asking for specific events?
Yeah, the 4x4, the men's 4x4 at the end. The very last event.
Was that between Botswana and South Africa? They finished first and second.
And Australia, who came third.
And Australia third. Yes, I watched it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was thinking
unbelievable
about
race.
that when you were talking about home advantage and how much that guy from Botswana, the way the crowd carried him to the finish line is incredible.
Well, he's also the best runner. He's the best 400 meter runner in the world. He's the Olympic champion, so like that
Okay,
helps as
forget
well.
what I
But
said. Okay, forget what I
that, well,
just
no,
said.
but both things are true. I
Yeah.
think both things are true. We're talking about small margins here, but talking about the greatest race in history, uh, there's some stats here. So the fastest ever times in the 4x4, USA from Stuttgart 93, then USA again from Paris 2024, but then Botswana's run this year, Botswana's run in Paris, and South Africa's run in the champs, and Australia's run in the champs. So that's the top six, and the three of the top six are there, basically. So pretty impressive, and they were all pretty close together. Leif Pillay, the South African kid, ran the fastest ever leg in a 4x4. Now, these are a bit messy because it's like, when does he start, etc. Does he run the 400? It's a bit messy, but suffice to say, he beat Michael Johnson's time. So Michael Johnson ran 42.9 and he ran 42.66. So that's
Wait, are you
really
saying
impressive.
it was the fastest 400 within a relay, like
Yes, the
of a
split.
league? Okay,
Yeah.
not a fastest
Which
400 standalone of all
no,
time.
no, which makes it messy because where do you start timing with
Yeah.
baton and all that stuff? So it's a bit messy, but regardless, the point is this kid ran really fast, faster than the world champion, so the Olympic medalist as
I've
well.
noticed
So
him the last 2 years, yeah, up and coming. He's looking
yeah,
really good.
he is. And interestingly, here there's all the splits here. I put it in the document. You can have a look. The thing that stood out to me most, if you have a look, don't look at the top, look at the bottom. And so the big difference here is who had the slowest runners. It wasn't about your fastest runners as much as the slowest runners, and trying to compress and not having the slowest person, which came to mind looking at the Dutch 4x4 women's or the mix, because they're missing Femke Bol. And so in the women's, Evelyn Salberg, who started in Paris Olympics, she was the first leg, was now anchoring the last leg, and you've lost Femke Bol. So not only have you lost one of the world's fastest 400 runners, maybe she's not one of the world's fastest 400s, but she's a very good 400 runner. You've lost her, and then you've added somebody worse. So it's like a 200% swing. And so no wonder they struggled. But yes, the slowest, and it's not fair to say this, but the slowest three people were the Australian, then two South Africans. So yeah, quite interesting there.
It was really cool to have Letile Tebogo there, obviously a big name, and then Akani Simbini as well. Obviously, Tebogo was there; it's his home race, and Akani Simbini is just a stone's throw away across the border from South Africa. But it feels to me like this guy has been around forever and doing well forever.
Akani Simbini?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so we mentioned it last year. Last year he was 11 years in a row running a sub 10, and he's run a sub 10 this year. That makes it 12. And, he also ran a really good anchor leg at the 4x1s this year. So, that was really cool to see I can't remember who he was racing against, but, he opened up and it was really impressive. I think they got silver in that race.
Should we move on to some NBA news? It seems like there was quite a few talking points from there lately.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. It's the finals at the moment. They just finished the first round. So there's a couple of things that I noted. And, we don't talk a lot of NBA here. And I'm a bit of a fan, but mostly sort of more casual fan. But two teams came back from 3-1 down. It's pretty rare for that to happen. Thankfully, one of them was my Pistons. So we're through the second round. I'm stoked about this. The other one was the 76ers, which is good for Joel Embiid. LeBron carried the Lakers through, which is wild given he's 41 years old. And at one point, he threw a lob to his son. He threw an alley-oop to Bronny. So that's just a really cool moment in sport to have a father throw an alley-oop to his son. It's crazy to think about that.
At the highest level.
Yeah. And then, they're talking about reforming the draft. So again, we talk about drafts a bit on this because I find them to be interesting measures to try and keep things equal. At the moment, they have the lottery pick, they have the lottery. So what happens is they've got the top handful of teams. They get, based on their record, they pick the best record gets the last pick of the first round, and they go up from there, right? And the second round is the same. The top half, or whatever it was 14 teams previously, of that, of the draft was decided via what they call a lottery. So like a bunch of balls, and they just pull out numbers, right? Or pull out teams. The reason they did this was to prevent what's called tanking, which is like intentional losing, right? So why, you want to be the best loser or the best at losing to get those. So what they did was instead of gifting you the result, what they did was they gave you better odds in the lottery of winning the the number one pick, so to speak. But now they're talking about updating it and expanding it from 14 teams to 16 teams. So basically, anybody who doesn't make the playoffs, plus now a couple play-in teams. They also made it so that you can't win back-to-back years, which fine, whatever. They're talking about having play-in teams, which is like they have now a 3-team play-in to try and make the bottom team in the finals. So having those 2 teams that don't make it, they get 1 to 2 lottery balls each. Then the bottom 3 get 2 lottery balls each. But then teams 4 to 10 get 3 balls. So this is like, now I want to finish in this 4 to 10 range so that I don't end up with the bottom 2, because then my odds are worse. So it prevents people trying to be the worst. Makes them, I guess the whole thought on is trying to make them not want to lose. Because the problem with the NBA is there's so many games. There's 78 games, 76 games, something like that. 72 games. Anyway, so it's like in the 70s. Whereas in the NFL, if you're trying to tank, you're losing a handful of games, like 2, 3, 4 max, because you don't know that you're going to be out of it till that point, right? So because there's only 17 games in a season, so they can't have these games with it, like just meaningless games and people aren't playing or whatever else. So yeah, but this is going to be voted on at the end of the month, and there'll be a sunset clause for 2029, which means they can continue it or kill it at that point.
Okay, interesting. Keep an eye on that. It's too many games. Too many. You need scarcity.
Yeah, but they won't do it because then the TV deals go down.
Yeah, exactly. I understand that, trying to get that balance. You see it in football, in English football, with more and more American owners buying football teams. They are bringing that kind of thinking to the sport. It'll be interesting to see where it ends up long term. I'm seeing a lot, and maybe it's just me, I'm seeing a lot of ACLs. I would love to go look at data to see if we are seeing more ACLs in soccer than we have before. I mean, I think Tottenham had 5 alone this year. They've only ever had less than 1 in their history. This year they've had 5. And that
what
could
happened
be an anomaly.
What happened to Tottenham this year?
Very stressed. They're fighting relegation. So there's that stress level. Is that what you're referring to?
What else? So that is one part of it that I agree with, and I agree that's a big factor in it. What else happened?
Well, they got rid of the chairman, Daniel Levy, and then they've gotten rid of multiple managers. I don't know what you're referring to.
Exactly. No, that's perfect. So I've led you down the path. What happens when you change managers?
You change training.
Correct. So now we've gone bunch of extra stress, and we're changing training styles and loads and all that stuff and game styles. So they're not ready for it.
Interesting, because Big Ange was there before last season, and he was known for high octane, crazy end-to-end football. You're running all day long, attacking all day long. So I wonder if that set them up this season they came into it fatigued, and then there's the multiple changes with the multiple coaches, and it's just a lot of load over a while, and it pops now only, and now it looks like it's isolated to this season.
Yeah, it's almost never isolated to the season. It's always like you got to look back a little bit, and it's always everything. It's never one thing. But I think these factors are significant factors in what's happened. There is change in staff.
Yeah. Did you see the reel I sent you? Did I send you this reel about Brighton Football Club where they brought like a martial arts expert in to show the players how to use their body weight, like in defending corners, attacking corners, how to get around opponents when not having the ball, like how to use the correct part of your body, the most forceful and power.
I mean, this happens all the time. Like there's wrestling coaches in rugby league because of all this stuff. Previous guest, Mike Wood that came on was a judo guy, and I used him. I mean, he played in the team that I coached, but we used him for some judo stuff in rugby league. So that's a big part of it. There's a ton of this stuff that happens.
I found it really interesting.
They also, I thought you were going to say they had a martial artist teach them how to fall and roll and take contact, because that's also very common. No, I'm serious. I'm not joking. No, I'm not making a joking about dives. I'm talking about a joke about like actually taking proper falls.
Okay, not getting injured.
Yeah. When you get tackled or when you get like injury. Fouled, how do you like roll properly?
Anyway, I send that to you. You send me a reel about Surrey Cricket Club and their Wi-Fi upgrades.
Yeah, so this is great. So basically, they've upgraded their Wi-Fi and set up a space so you can sit there with your laptop, so that you can work from home from the cricket ground. I think this is great. Honestly, it's not that different to watching it on TV, although county cricket isn't on TV, because the biggest problem here is county cricket no one cares about and no one supports it. And so they're really trying to get people to go to the games, get people to watch, etc. listen, good Wi-Fi, I think, is kind of table stakes for stadiums these days. People are what is called in media, film and TV, they talk about dual screening, when in reality it's just one screen and whatever else is happening in front of you. It's like most people, when you're watching cricket, want to be on their phone doing something else. And if they
Yeah.
don't want to be, they will be. So you kind of need this. And, in America, like good Wi-Fi is kind of table stakes at all the stadiums. So I don't, it's not a heavy lift. These cricket clubs are not in the middle of nowhere. So, Lords is in the middle of London. So it should be fine.
And then there's also been some activity in the tech world. This has come all across my timeline the last few days. Coros and Wi-Fi and Wahoo joined forces, as well as, no one saw this coming, Zwift buying Rouvy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here, and this is a space I play in a little bit. So, like, it's got to make sense for Wahoo and Coros. They've got a common enemy called Garmin. This certainly helps Wahoo head unit users, right? Because now if you're a triathlete that's using a Wahoo head unit, you can get better functionality of that ecosystem if you use a Coros watch, right? Because now you can have it all in the Wahoo app, or you can have it all in the Coros app, and it sort of all makes sense. All your training load metrics. Now, granted, most people are probably exporting to a third party anyway, someone like Training Peaks, but so be it. This is probably going to help both companies a little bit. This is really a play for Wahoo's treadmills, right? So it's a Wahoo treadmill gets then used with a Coros watch, and your data is a bit better in that respect. It can be used a bit better.
Perfect partnership and good synergy.
Yeah, there'll be some good functionality between the two in terms of things like uploading workouts from Coros, and the Wahoo treadmill eventually. The Kicker Run will have things like changes in paces and grades and stuff based on whatever workout. So I think that's kind of cool. And honestly, like the Coros Dura, their head unit, their cycling head unit, it's not great at the moment. And Wahoo killed that watch they had because that was like not doing well either.
Yeah.
I know you used to complain endlessly about the one you had to wear for work. So yeah, and then
no, they're a great partner, great sponsor. I never complain, and I need a bigger contract from them next year. So I did not once complain.
Mate, their tech is bad, and their CEO knows it. So you don't have to lie to him. He's an honest man who agreed that watch was terrible. So you very appropriately wore it and were publicly very positive about it, but privately, yeah, not so great. I agree. But Zwift, of course, Zwift exists. It has its own ecosystem, but buying Rouvy makes sense for them because Rouvy was based on real life courses and locations. So it makes sense for Zwift. It's like, hey, you want to ride in Zwiftopia and do all sorts of fake stuff? Here you go. You want to do these races or whatever, go for that. Also, if you're training for something specific and you want to do that course, here's this. So it makes a ton of sense. But interestingly, I mean, only recently Rouvy were buying other apps. So there's a big change here. It must have been a pretty big buyout from Eric and the team there.
Makes sense that you phrase it that way because from what I understand is they're going to keep it separate. So you have those options of virtual world versus virtual real world, if I call it that way.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I mean, even if they brought real courses into Zwift, it would still be a benefit over what they have now. But if you can see the real course as well, it's even better.
Yeah. Right. Thanks for finding and putting all that together. Very interesting. We threw forward to it earlier. Let's now, without further ado, get to our guest this week. Your chat, David, with Melissa Muzeau.
Melissa Muzeau is a PhD candidate at the University of Canberra, where her research focuses on athlete profiling and, more specifically, the integration of affect to the well-known physiological performance determinants in endurance sport. Whilst her research is through the Active Brain Group at the University of Canberra, it is in collaboration with On Running. During her PhD, Melissa has consulted to the likes of the Australian Institute of Sport, amongst many other professional organisations across both physiology and profiling of athletes. She's also currently working as a sports science consultant through Inside. Prior to all of this, Melissa was the co-founder, CTO, and eventually CEO of Sport Testing, the first mobile performance laboratory in France specialized in the collection, analysis, and interpretation of data to help coaches to develop the best performance strategies for their team. She completed her undergraduate studies in athletic training at the University of Grenoble, Alps, and prior to then completing her master's in research and innovation at the University of Savoie, Mont Blanc. Melissa is a keen runner herself, doing quite a bit of running with the athletes at the Australian Institute of Sport whilst in Canberra. She's also responsible for me missing the men's Olympic triathlon and losing a toenail or two, all in the name of science. Melissa, thank you for joining the 1% Better podcast. No, it's okay. I was happy to do it in the name of science and actually enjoyed my morning with you greatly and your team. So, but I did think I wasn't super happy when I realized I'd booked the day of the men's Olympic triathlon. So,
Yeah, I got to watch it while you were running, so
Yeah,
that's
well,
pretty good.
I got to watch bits of it. One of I think it was Gianni had it on his phone, so
Yeah.
it was cool. But let's start at the beginning. So we met many years ago. I think probably 2021, 2020, somewhere in there
Yep.
at UTMB. So when we met, you were running sport testing, and you're happily grinding away as an entrepreneur. What made you want to do a PhD?
Ooh, I didn't want to do a PhD. I just ended up doing a PhD. Basically, at the end of sport testing, we could not find the right business model, so we had to close the company. And I had this vision that we were focusing mainly on physiological aspect, and that in the future, if we wanted to make a difference in elite sport, that we had to better understand the psychological and cognitive aspect of performance. And so I wanted to find a lab to develop this aspect, but also a brand to carry the message that athletes are more than just a body moving, but they are also human, and we need to start to understand this aspect of performance. So I just contacted both a lab and a brand, which is on running in this case. And they told me, well, we can offer you a PhD. So I was like, okay, why not? I never been to Australia. Let's try.
Very good. Well, your appreciation of coffee has no doubt gone up and changed significantly.
Well, I'm not sure because I'm not a coffee lover, and I had to start drinking coffee because of the PhD, obviously. But probably the best country to start drinking coffee, I guess.
Yeah, it's helpful. It's helpful. That's interesting though, because I remember meeting you and being connecting over the fact that we about the psychology and psychobiology aspects of profiling athletes and testing, and also over the entrepreneurial spirit and the lack of wanting to do a PhD. So one of us changed our minds, and one of us didn't.
Yeah, I remember at this time we were talking about glucose monitoring, and I was interested in the fact that we could potentially detect spike in cortisol coming out of this metric. And it was pretty cool to see that you also had this innovative spirit into using metrics for performance improvement. But yeah, bonded over trauma also.
Yeah, trauma bonded indeed. Well, you'll be happy to hear continuous cortisol monitors are on the way. So we'll see what happens with those. I don't know how far they are away, and I don't know how good they'll be, but they are on the way. So I think that'll be once we can start to use continuous metabolic monitoring across hormones and those sort of things. I think it will be quite interesting to see what happens in our understanding. But I have a question for you. Is it harder, better, stronger? Or will we see it become smarter, better, happier?
You read my PhD proposal now.
Of course.
Well, that's the tagline of my PhD is how can we switch from a harder, better, stronger to a smarter, better, happier, with this idea of integrating more the affective experience around running, and how can this contribute to performance and a more sustainable performance. Looking at longevity of the career of the athletes, but also their happiness. And because we are also in a society where we have a lot of pressure, let's say athletes have money behind contract and they need to perform. And there is more and more topic around like mental health for those athletes. And I was very happy when I followed remotely. I follow remotely the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, to see more athletes talking about it. The amazing ice skater, the American one, was showing that she decided to come back to competition with the guideline of only enjoying what she was doing. And when I started this PhD, it was kind of, oh, she's a bit crazy to think that just by being happy, athletes can perform. And I can see that there is more and more people interested in this approach. Even the AIS now, they have this guideline of win well, which is a mindset where it's not just about when they win, but how they win. And the well-being of athletes are at the core of this strategy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we need to define some terms and create some sort of signposts for people, because I think you and I read this research, or you're doing the research. I'm reading the research, and even then, some of it's a bit confusing for me. I think one of the first things we need to delineate here for people is this kind of happiness in life and in sport, which is part of what we're talking about. But there's also then how we feel physically during exercise. And those two things are not always the same. And you're doing a lot of research on the latter one more than the former one, which is an important delineation to make. And then what I need for you to do, because this is your world, and I kind of understand them enough, but not enough, around explaining some terms for me. So affect or affective valence, or both, or separately.
All right. Let's start by maybe the basics. All the research that was done previously regarding well-being and affect, which was more called mood, we're looking at, is there like an optimal profile for athletes to perform when you're looking at fluctuation over day, basically looking at different indicator of vigor, tiredness, and stuff like this. And some researchers have shown that there is an iceberg profile, which means that if you have a peak in vigor, but all the negative indicators are quite low, it's going to be promoting performance and helping them to perform, especially when you're tracking, let's say, during the Olympic Games over different days. It seems like this is helping to predict when the peak performance should happen in terms of the psychological state.
Is that kind of like arousal, and when we're talking about things like flow state, or is that slightly different?
No, this is more mood, which is more like in your general life, which doesn't really relate to what you're experiencing when you're running. It's on your day-to-day basis. It's something very stable that doesn't need something to trigger a change. It's quite stable and doesn't really fluctuate. What I've been interested in is more like, how does the exercise impact your affect, which is considered, constituted of two components, which is the affective valence, so how much pleasure you are experimenting when you're running, but also your activation states, which doesn't have to be positive or negative, but let's say you are in a low activation state, you're like very calm and quiet, and high activation states, like if you had 3 coffee for me, 10 for you. And then with those two information, you you can classify a type of emotion that athletes are experimenting. This part is a bit more complex, because to experiment an emotion, you need to have this affective component, but also to have an appraisal of this aspect, which is then balanced versus your goals in life. Let's say if you are experimenting a lot of pain while you are running, but you want to become an elite athlete, this might provide like a positive emotion.
Yeah. So really what we're talking about is your relationship to how you feel while exercising, right? Is like, is this painful? Is that pain good or bad? What does this all mean in that context? Is that fair to say here?
Yeah, so the theory behind affect is that you have fluctuation which are based on the intensity of your exercise. And I came up with the idea of using affect into athlete profiling, because you could see that for most of the athletes, you will have increase in pleasure up to the first threshold, and then a decrease of pleasure after the second threshold. But what was happening in between was highly variable. And so it was quite interesting for me to know if the one who had a later decline in pleasure in terms of their physiological capacity were going to be better and perform better. So it's anything related to how homeostasis disturbance is impacting your feeling, which then help you to pace yourself, and which is also a component kind of parallel to your perceived effort, which is probably more known to the common population.
Yeah, this stuff is so fascinating. It's like a complete different dimension, right? We talk about the 4 dimensions of physiology. This is kind of like, really, that's really almost 2 dimensions, and this is the 3rd dimension of like, this is the psychology that impacts that, right?
So that was exactly the approach I wanted to take initially, is that in physiology, we have 3 to 4 performance determinants. First one is the VO2 max. Second one is the percentage of this VO2 max as second threshold. And the third one is the running economy. So I wanted to see if this affective component could be also explained through the lens of those three different performance indicator, but also how this affective valence was stable over time in terms of fatigue resistance, which is the fourth physiological performance determinant. So I came with like a very physiology-based approach, and then I discovered that psychology is very different, and so it didn't really work out the way I was planning it. But yeah, that was the approach initially.
Okay. Next, the next definition I need from you is motivation.
Motivation. I think we probably all know what is motivation is, like how much effort you are capable of putting into a task in order to achieve your goal. And so basically the concept was to try to understand if against your perceived efforts, the motivation you had was sufficient in order to complete the task. And there is a lot of research showing that your maximal motivation is capping as effort you can put into a task. And there is not many measurements that are done in task for motivation. Usually it's done through a questionnaire, try to understand the intensity of your motivation, but also the quality. Quality, which means that are you motivated by more like intrinsic factor, like the pleasure of doing the task, or are you more motivated by the rewards the task is going to give you, let's say the money prize? And it seems like the more intrinsic one are more helping to keep you engaged long term in the activity. And I was also very interested to look at how this motivation fluctuates with intensity, but also with fatigue.
Yeah, okay. The last definition, arousal.
Arousal. Yeah, that's a hard one, especially for all the French athletes I had, because we don't have a word to traduce arousal, but it's basically an activation state. As I was telling you before, it's like how activated you're feeling, which can be described as, let's say, if you are like very sleepy, you will have a low arousal, and if you are very well awake, you will have a high arousal, which can be impacted by a lot of things. We discovered that even a downhill run can increase your arousal. It's basically related to the amount of energy you need to put into a task. Let's say in the downhill section, you will need more focus and to be more attentive of where you're putting your feet. So your arousal is going to increase. And it doesn't need to be necessarily associated to your heart rate or your physical components, which was for a long time thought to be, okay, if your heart rate is high, your arousal is high, but it's not necessarily the case. It's more like how much resources you need to put into the task.
Yeah. So, I mean, in arousal, we talk about it a lot in physiology already. It's probably the best known, right? Because this is where we're talking about Goldilocks zones and over or under arousal and these sort of how to perform, right? So I run over anxious. And so I need to down regulate to optimize my arousal, right? To try and reach flow state or performance state versus some people who are very relaxed. None of them are endurance athletes, but there are some people, maybe sprinters, who are very relaxed, who need to psych themselves up to be optimally aroused here. That's kind of the paradigm that, as I've understood it in terms of performance psychology. So now we have motivation, which will dictate how, if we think about, say, a VO2 max test, we have motivation. How motivated am I to do well in this and complete it? How aroused am I? Right. And if it's your first day getting tested and you're a young athlete, maybe you're very aroused. You're like, what's going on here? I'm very motivated. Right. And then we have the affect or affective valence during or within the test that will impact things as well. Right. These three factors all will impact how I perform on the test to some degree beyond my physiology. Is that fair to say?
And your perceived effort, which is like how heavy and hard and strenuous is a physical task for you, which is kind of the basic of the psychobiological model of endurance performance, where it's kind of what is limiting your endurance performance. There is a couple of studies showing that when you are running a test to exhaustion, basically your RPE is predicting when you're going to stop this task. And interestingly, just after being exhausted, you're still able to produce at least 3 times the power output that you had in the task, which means that there is really something going on with your mind telling you to stop more than just your muscle not being able to produce effort. So it's also a component that is interesting to track in order to better understand the profile of the athletes.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Boston Marathon. We were recording this a couple of days after Boston Marathon. John Correa ran the record on the course and was jumping afterwards. So it's a good example of, I don't think he was easing up. He was running as hard as he could to try and, run 201 low, not, 201 high. So it's quite interesting to think about that. And we've all sort of experienced that, right? I finished Boston and just kept walking. I was like, all right, we're fine here. So I couldn't have run harder, but at the same time, the task failure or task cessation is a very difficult one. And they differ between time to exhaustion and like time trial style efforts, right? Because those things are slightly different as well. But just to clarify there, those factors will impact RPE or they will impact how you respond to RPE or both?
So one of my theory was that the harder it gets, the more aversive is getting the effort, and then it's impacting motivation. So it was kind of a mediation model of perceived effort or effort in general is impacting motivation, and the affective aspect is kind of explaining this variation in motivation. I think it's a bit more complex than this in the end, because basically perceived effort is not just coming from how much work is your body doing. It's kind of a mental image of the command you're sending to your muscle, which is then compared to the distance remaining, the visual flow you have, can be also the downhill and uphill that can impact your perceived effort without necessarily impacting your physiology. So it's all those elements that are impacting how you perceive effort without necessarily impacting effort, that are, I think, playing a parallel game into how you regulate your efforts. I think affective response and perceived effort are both together dictating how you're pacing yourself. And if you're deciding, not necessarily consciously, but deciding to slow down, keep going, or stop your run.
Yeah, so this is a lot around the central governor type of theory, right? Is we get, I guess, feedback from our environment, ourselves, whatever, muscle pain, heat, body core temperature, all these things, heart rate, etc., and that sort of fits on top of the model of that we have, right? So let's say a 10K. If I've run lots of 10Ks, I know what it should feel like at 5Ks, and if it feels easier at 5Ks, then I have positive reinforcement. I feel good. My RPE is mismatched in a positive way. That can then boost motivation and boost affect. In contrast to the other way, which is when you, and again, they do this via false feedback, right? They tell them they're running slower or faster, and then that changes everything in the other way. We've all had these experiences.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about the central governor model is that they had this strong emphasis on, like, it's the signal you get from the muscle telling you how hard is the effort. But there's actually some study showing that if you stop this feedback coming from the muscle, your RPE will still increase, which is kind of telling you that it's coming from like this expected sensation of effort that you think you're going to experiment, that is then compared to your actual effort and not just necessarily coming from your muscles, which is, obviously integrating all the pain aspect and the perceived effort aspect, plus environmental stress and stuff like this.
Yeah. And this speaks to a couple of things that listeners would have experienced themselves. New distance is often way harder to pace and way more uncomfortable towards the end because it's a new realm and you don't have a superimposed understanding of what that should feel like. And then similarly, an unfamiliar route can often be both harder and feel longer because you don't know it versus being familiar with the route. It makes it a lot easier in many aspects in that respect because you can map your mental model onto that.
Yeah, I think that's where race recognition before is probably quite very important on this aspect of perceived effort, definitely.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And my advice, again, back to invoke Boston, and Zylan's going to have a good laugh because he says I always invoke Boston. But I said to a lot of people is go run the hills. So you go out and run that hilly patch so that you understand what the hills are going to be like, so that you're not wondering what's coming. And also, thankfully, because it finishes in town, you can sort of run out and back on the course. So I was very familiar with basically everything from the beginning of the hills to the end of the course when I ran it. And that made life a lot easier because that's basically 30 kilometers onwards, which is where it gets hard in a marathon. Right?
Yeah,
So,
you could also see it at the cross-country championship, the Australian championship in Canberra. All the one who won were the local athletes because they were just so used to the track, and I think it gave you like a big advantage when you're racing home from in terms of pacing and like effort regulation.
Yeah. So speaking about this, when we think about effort, what are the factors that govern effort?
What do you mean? Be more specific.
I guess so. Yeah, let me think about it again. So I guess we sort of gone over what goes into effort, right? It's feedback, it's what we were expecting versus that. There's obviously motivational factors, arousal factors to some degree as well, and then affect. I guess, are there differences in the way people experience effort?
Well, yeah, that was the main topic of my PhD, was to try to understand, firstly, what is caping effort, which is basically referring to all those physiological parameters we were talking about, like
Yep.
what is the upper limit of what you can do, but also what are you willing to do based on your psychological abilities. And so we saw that there is different way of experimenting effort. On a classical incremental test, a VO2 max test, the common response would be to have more and more aversive affect, so less pleasure the harder it gets, and more arousal, so you get more activated. But it seems like we got 4 different profiles. So we had some athletes who were staying quite stable, so their affective response didn't change no matter the intensity. We had some athletes who had a decrease in pleasure and decrease in activation state. And we had other athletes who had only an increase in activation, but no change in pleasure. No judgment, but when I was testing them, like, it was very surprising to see some athletes who were still enjoying themselves, even when it was getting hard.
That's hello. How you going?
I was very fascinated by those people. And what we discovered is that when it gets very hard, so basically above the second threshold, for one of those categories, so the one who had a decrease in activation and a decrease in pleasure, it seems like they had a higher RPE, like a higher perceived effort of 17 versus 15, which is quite significant and meaningful.
Just
and
for listeners,
motivation.
That's on a 6 to 20 scale.
Yeah.
Rather than a 1 to 10 scale. So you said 15 to 17, sorry?
Yeah, 15 to 17. And they also had a reduced motivation and this intensity. So basically on paper, you will expect that this cluster is performing less well on a performance task, because if they perceived effort at a higher rate, and if their motivation is lower, you will expect that they will perform less well, which is not what we found, interestingly. But what we found is that they kind of replicated the same strategy when they were racing their 3K time trial, which was done about 1 to 2 weeks after. So it seems like each athlete has their own way of regulating their effort. And when I told you I was coming from a physiological background and vision of what is performance and we should make them fit into an optimal profile, it seems like here what is more interesting is to understand the profile and maybe try to give them some strategy according to how they are regulating effort and perceiving efforts that will work for them. But it doesn't seem like there is one profile that is better than others.
That's fascinating. I would have, of course, like you, hypothesized the people who enjoyed things after VT2 or after second threshold would have performed better, right? Because they enjoy that. They go, this is great. Here we are. But ultimately, on some level, it doesn't seem to be the case. That's absolutely fascinating.
Well, I think that would be very interesting to see if it's still the case on a 10K race, because it's becoming longer and then your motivation might be more important. And that's probably where I'm still still a strong believer that we will see difference, and one of the profile will be less good on a long distance, but still to be proven.
Well, and maybe 10K isn't long enough either, right? Because it's still heavily physiologically determined. So maybe we need to get longer to ultra endurance, where physiology is important but becomes less important, because now you're dealing with other adverse factors. So maybe psychology becomes a bigger factor.
Well, yes and no, because the only difference we found was above the second threshold. So basically, if you're making them run at LT1 or just below LT2, I'm not sure we will see a difference in this profile. But yeah, maybe those differences are also linked to other factors that we haven't measured, like could be their capacity of inhibition from afferent feedback and painful stimulus. That is, I think, something that's it's probably the next step, like trying to understand how executive function are also contributing to this pacing behavior and the experimentation of effort. I think there is still a lot of metrics to integrate into this profiling.
Yeah. And so we just talked about the fact that it probably doesn't, at this stage, as we understand it, really impact, like we don't see a propensity for certain clusters to succeed versus others. But do you think there's an implication for non-athletes here? You know, if I'm thinking about, because, and I know the world of science well enough to know that you have to sell your research to everybody based on exercise rather than training, because that's where the money comes from, and that's where, Canberra, University of Canberra is like, yes, this is about getting more people active rather than athletes, because that's where the government gives them money. So do you think there's an implication here for exercise prescription in non-athletic population?
Well, that's basically where all the research has been done is in a sedentary population or non-athletes, because the goal is to make sure people come back to exercise and to make sure that they adhere to a physical program. And so it seems like the more positive is your affect while you're running, the bigger is the chance that you stick to a program. So it seems like the peak affective stage you're experimenting during your effort is super important, but also how you finish your effort. Let's say if you finish on a bad
peak
point,
end effect, right?
Yeah,
this is the stuff we hear about from dentists and all that sort of stuff, where it's like the worst it is or the best it is, and then what it finishes like. Those two factors are the most important in our recollection of the experience.
Yeah, definitely. And there is probably also some aspect regarding, are you asking them to follow a specific pace, or are they self-selecting their pace? It seems like the self-selected group from studies are enjoying more their activity. So I think there is also some guideline regarding like how much autonomy you are leaving them, and also which intensity, because what we talk about regarding like this zone where there is a decrease in pleasure, maybe for a population like this, you don't want to make them stay too long in this zone, which then probably goes into how do you build your program. It's not because you have someone doing high intensities that it's going to be detrimental, because it's shorter. So the time you stay in this negative affective state might not be as detrimental as if you let them for 30 minutes just in between LT1 LT2, where it's probably not going to be super enjoyable for this public. So I guess a lot of consideration in this regard. And I think if we goes more towards high-level athletes, because obviously they're going to have to train in this zone where it hurts and where it's not super pleasant. I had some discussion with some mental preparator, and there's probably some strategy about like how do you accept what's going to happen during the task. Also, how can you maybe down-regulate your arousal, or it's going to be unpleasant, and accept that it's going to be unpleasant.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff you can do here even just from a theming perspective. So there's a bunch of, rehab exercises that no one wants to do, right? So, and that's different, right? That's not painful. It's just, we just don't like them, right? So, and there's similar stuff there is like, how do we get those people to do those things? And sometimes it's about how you frame it. It's like, all right, we're doing this once a week and we're going to call it broccoli day and it's going to be terrible and we're going to hate it and we're all coming. We're all going to do it and we put on good music and wear funny clothes and then like it becomes a bit of a thing. So you can, that's all psychology, just reframing and reshaping our perception around this thing that we don't want to do.
Yeah, and I think Australia has inspired me a lot regarding like how do you make the environment around training a good environment in order to accept this kind of session. Over there, the consistency is key. Like you don't want to miss one session, and because you're gonna spend some good time with your mate, you just you're not afraid of having this hard session, and there is a big emphasis putting into how much pleasure the group is having together.
Yeah. And then, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that influences that. There's a big team sport culture there. I think we've had offline conversations. Like I would say Australian sports science has driven team sport first, endurance sport second, whereas a lot of the parts of the world, it's actually the other way around. Is that team sports is more following endurance sports, certainly from in many ways. So I think there's implications there, and certainly society impacts that as well. But you've been so where I lost toenails was because I was happy to accept being part of a research study with a shoe size that was a bit small for me in the name of science. But you mentioned before how people experience a run, for instance, will impact things. This is where On steps in, because On goes, listen, we want people running as much as possible, enjoying their running as much as possible in our shoes so we can sell more shoes. Like, that's candidly, that's the reality. We shouldn't be shy about that. And ultimately that's better for society as well. So you've done a lot of research on Supershoes on trail. Let's talk about it. What have you, their role is being questioned, right? Because Supershoes came out of roads, running straight lines on the flat. There's been questions about longitudinal bending stiffness. So we can't bend a plate. Is that good uphill? Probably not. So what are you finding? What have you found from your research? Let's start there.
Maybe let's start by the approach.
Cool.
So the idea was that basically when you test the shoes, you look at how efficient you are when running with the shoes. But here we're talking about trail running footwear. And when you look at how much running economy is predicting performance, it's just taking like a very small amount of performance prediction. And so the idea was, okay, can we also look at how we are experimenting effort, like how much the psychological part is playing into performance in this distance, especially the longer is a race, the more important this parameter is going to be. And so one of the first study was to look at how foam instead of the plates. Other researchers had looked at that and they didn't really find benefits of having a plate, especially on the uphill section. But we were interested about how foam is impacting running economy, but also your perceived effort and your affective experience. And what we found is that it seems like the foam was providing some improvement in running economy, about 1.2%. Overall on the flat, uphill and downhill section. And this improvement seemed to be higher on the flat section, about 2%, which was quite significant. 1% uphill, and it was a bit unclear in the downhill condition. Not saying that there is no improvement on the downhill condition, but the way we measure it, we were not able to capture it. And well, it was great to have this information, but still doesn't tell you if it's improving performance, right? Because you're doing it in the lab. So that's why we decided to conduct a second study, which is the one you generally participated in, which was to look at how this footwear impact performance. Can you run further with one footwear in comparison to the other one? And also going back to one of the physiological determinants, which is physiological resilience, like how
much did your physiology deteriorate across 90 minutes?
Exactly. So basically doing a running economy measurement before and then after, and to see if we could find some difference between the shoes.
just quietly, that was the single worst part of that whole study.
Really?
Yeah. So you're doing a 90-minute loop up and around, all this climbing, this descending, and then it's like, and then at the end, by the way, you've just done 90 minutes. Now go jog up and down here to test your running economy. I was like, oh, can we be done? This is terrible. Sorry, carry on.
Well, there is a lot of things to criticize regarding how research is done and how, let's say, if you don't have a P of 0.05, is it telling you that the shoes is not working or not? We found that in overall, participants had a difference of about, I think, 250 meter in terms of distance run. So we had them to run at a 14 RPE, which is just below the second threshold. And so it was self-paced, and they were basically producing the same effort with the two footwear. But this seems to be running further with the more compliant foams that we tested, the ones that was providing improvement in running economy in the lab. But this wasn't significant. The interesting thing we found is that with the AFT foam, it seems like we had a better speed preservation. Let's say for the first loop, they were both running at the same speed. But when you were looking at the last loop for each athlete, they had a big drop in speed with the traditional foam. And interestingly, their affective state was following the same strand. So it's hard to tell if this was because of the foam propriety or just their conscious sensation of, okay, I'm not failing the task because I'm still able to sustain the same effort. But what this is telling us is that in the lab, you can see that you're producing less effort and so you have more pleasure. In the field, it's the same effort, but it's still like, it seems like you are still producing, you have experimenting more pleasure too. Yeah. So it's a complex, I think, combination of factor of there is less effort produced when you're running with the AFT foam, but also the sensation of running with a softer foam can be more pleasant and also help you to have better speed preservation over long distance.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, and again, we're cut from the same cloth. Real world measures, ecologically valid. Yeah. Don't worry so much about the lab, to some degree. You're now more of a lab, better trained scientist than I'll ever be. So there's also that. But one of the things I'd say, and it's, again, I caveat it that way because it's not a criticism of the study. I think it's an unfortunate reality of the study, is we were doing loops on a certain course. And so you don't want to, if you have the ability, like thinking about mine, I think on the Supershoe trial, I probably was a little bit further ahead, but I didn't want to start a second loop, or you didn't want me to start a second loop. So I ran around the parking lot a little bit extra. It's like, so I think I might have gone 350, 400 meters further if I was further back, because I would have used the finishing spurt there, right? So it's, how do you negate that part of it? And again, you can't, that's human nature. If you look at cutoffs in marathons, right, there's a spurt, like a number of people who run 259, that is an outlier, right? And there's a number of people who run, 329 for the same reasons or whatever. So that aspect of psychology and pacing can't be erased. That's human nature.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we probably needed way more athletes in order to detect something significant. Yeah. And because we were doing it on 2 different days. And so basically you introduce some variability in this affective response and in the running economy measurements that wasn't allowing us to capture what we wanted to capture. But I think it was already quite a good start to see, okay, what we found in the lab, we cannot really measure it in the field, but we can see other things. And when you only have 2 or 3 weeks to conduct a huge data collection, you do what you can. Yeah. But yeah, I think there is a lot of things to do regarding fatigue resistance also on those footwear. We conducted then another study in the lab this time where we were basically asking the same task to athletes, so to run for 90 minutes on the treadmill at a set intensity in between their 2 thresholds, and looking at how their running economy was impacted when comparing 2 different foam. It's just a teaser because I cannot share the result yet. But yeah, it was
okay. Interesting.
There is a lot of thing to do on this physiological resilience topic, and the footwear needs to go there because if you see that there is a running economy improvement of 1% when you're on a fresh state, what does that mean when you are at the end of a marathon, right?
And there's two things that are changing there: you and the shoe. Right? There's the property of materials, which changes. So is the benefit from the shoe the same? And is your physiology remaining intact, right? And that's the other aspect of this that is hard to understand. We think it's all the second one, but we don't know if it's not the first one as well. But I do think probably all of the benefits we've seen in them have been measured because we can measure them, and they're all running economy related. I actually think there's a huge fatigue resistance or durability component to it, particularly in the trail space. But again, that will depend. Like the problem with trail is what trail, because there's some trails that are basically road, and Salamon's calling that gravel, and that makes me feel physically ill. There's no such thing as a gravel shoe, but whatever. I have friends at the company, and fair enough. But there's some trails that are basically roads, and look, Western states, people run in road shoes for the second half of it from Forest Hill. So there's some of that stuff, and then there's also something that's horrifically technical. In and around the sky races of Switzerland, where you're like, you can't be in a super shoe here because it won't last. It'll be ripped to pieces. So you need to think through it.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, when you see cyclists changing, bike depending on what kind of profile they are going to race on, I think there is some perspective to take on running here. When I was mentioning that when you're running downhill, you have a higher arousal. Maybe there is some stuff happening also on the psychological components that are important to consider in order to make sure you are not wasting too much energy, because the more hours you are, the more energy you are engaging in the task. And so there is maybe some strategy, if you know that there is a big downhill section, to maybe switch gear. And still some theory, but I'm a strong believer that there is some strategy that can be adapted with the footwear, but that also apply to crew support, and everything you can do during the race in order to maintain this motivation state and motivation level as high as possible to perform as best as possible.
Yeah, I mean, there's a section, I don't know how well you know the UTMB course, I know it way too well. There's a section from Champ-Lac, which is a nice long downhill, which is not very technical. And, something like a really nice super shoe with a good rear foot rocker would be really nice in there. Like real big, thick, chunky things that I could run downhill in. It'd be perfect, right? It'd save the legs. It'd be really nice. And then, when I get to a more technical section, maybe I need less foam, more lugs, those sort of things, right? So I can certainly see a change there. Do you think that's where we're going to see? We're going to see people changing shoes throughout a race based on certain aspects of it, if there's a big enough difference? I mean, we kind of already see that. I guess I've answered my question. We see that at Western states already, so...
Well, or maybe shoes that can adapt. I don't know how, but let's say you take off something and then the shoes is lighter in this section. And I don't know. I'm not a footwear developer, but there is probably some thing to consider that doesn't necessarily relate only to running economy, which is going to be the hard part. How do you measure and assess that the footwear is doing what you want them to do? On this aspect, and which aspect is it? The biomechanical part because you're trying to preserve the leg? Is it physiological parts because you're trying to save some fuel to keep going? Is it more the psychological aspects because we know that there is a lot of people also withdrawing from race, which I'll link. Let's talk about it. Gastrointestinal problem and all the things that are bringing you some aversive sensation, basically, and are pushing you to withdraw because your motivation state is not high enough versus the effort you are experimenting and the aversive state associated to it. So, definitely.
Unreal. Yeah, that's fascinating. There's so many things here. Is how do we tune shoes to people? And then how do we, we had Kimia Bear-Lozier on the podcast recently.
I heard. Yeah.
And she, we talk about placebo Supershoes as one of her studies. And I find that to be fascinating because everyone treats placebo like it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a thing and we can use it perhaps. So why don't we just change shoes? Same pair of shoes, just change them up. Now you got a fresh pair of shoes. And there's real physics reasons that may be helpful. But if nothing else, the placebo effect of I've got new shoes on, here we go.
Yeah, it was a super interesting study, and I love this study. And it's going back to the information you're giving to your athletes is impacting their perception and their affective state, and this is impacting also how they are racing after. So if you're thinking about even just the feedback you're giving to athletes when they are running, this impact definitely their motivation. And I think we need to start to understand better like how the information you're giving them, but also the state they are coming in when they are starting a race are impacting their performance. I remember the study where they showed that the ones that were smiling more before the race was like artificial intelligence looking at pleasure before starting a race and completion time. Seems like the one who were like more relaxed and more enjoyed and happy before starting were less withdrawing in the end, which then goes to the last study where we look at how physiological load impacts your motivation through your affective state.
Let's talk about that. So physiological load impacts your motivation. Okay.
Yeah, so basically the harder it gets, the less motivated you are.
Yep.
It seems like you have a decrease in 30% of motivation when you have a +1 in heart rate speed ratio. So it's getting a bit technical, but basically most of this let me go back to it. So basically what we found is that physiological load is impacting motivation, but 30% of this change is mediated by your affect, which means that the harder the intensity is, the more aversive is your effort, and this is impacting your motivation to pursue. At the opposite, the lower is the intensity, it seems like your affective state is enhancing your motivation. So there is like a big role of your pleasure during this task impacting your motivation to pursue.
And so the heart rate to speed ratio, is that about I guess a worsening in, like, because that's an internal to external load ratio basically, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and so a worsening of that impacts how we are perceiving things as well. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
So when I'm running my 5K pace and all of a sudden my heart rate starts to go up, I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel as good as it used to, right?
Yeah, it's getting harder and it's basically impacting your affective state and your motivation. And
definitely. Wow. Back to the thing you mentioned before, I had this a picture blazing into my head from when I crewed UTMB. We had an athlete who will remain nameless who ended up doing very well. And I was crewing them with their spouse, or not spouse at the time, spouse now. And I remember the feedback that was given. Obviously, the spouse or soon-to-be spouse knew them very well. And the feedback that was given at some point changed, and their emotions changed, and they got quite angry at one point. And it was quite interesting to watch. There was one point of, I don't want to hear splits. And then they ended up performing really well off the back of that. And their spouse kind of knew, but the spouse also stopped giving the splits and those sort of things. So, but there's certainly something there though around how that's impacting things, and how, I'm pushing harder and my split's getting worse. Like my gap to the next person's getting worse. That's negative feedback. That's going to worsen it's going to decrease pleasure in that, versus I'm not pushing and that gap is reducing. Oh, this is positive. I'm more motivated. I feel better about things, right? So a lot of what we talked about today has been very technical in terms of the language, and it's a bit messy with the definitions. But I think if people put themselves in the situation, it all makes sense. We kind of intrinsically understand this stuff without being explicit about it.
And I think you're touching on a point that is going back to individual profile. Maybe there is some athletes who don't need to have their pleasure increase. Maybe the goal for them is to like increase their arousal, and then they'll perform better. So that's where it comes to a point where it's important to better understand the athletes at the individual level and not just make generalization based on study where you're finding, okay, it seems like pleasure is impacting motivation, so let's make them all happy. It's not what I'm saying. It's let's look at the individual response and try to find the strategy that is adapted to the athletes.
I have told the story before. I don't think I've told it on the podcast, but this is what the best coaches do. I watched a coach of mine who happens to listen to this podcast. A coach of mine once did this with an athlete who was quite young at the time, but she's ended up playing. Claire Polkinghorne was the athlete. She's played, I don't know how many games for the Matildas. She's the game's all-time games leader for the Matildas. She captained the Matildas. She's an amazing athlete, but she was a junior sprinter and hurdler. And we were at nationals, and this coach started a fight with her over nothing intentionally because she ran really well angry. And she came out the next day and absolutely blazed the field. It wasn't even close. And she won a gold by, meters. And I remember thinking, oh, he did that on purpose. And I spoke to him about it since. He's like, yep,
pretty cool.
Did that on purpose. Well, there's certainly ethical arguments in either direction, right? And you can only do that so many times because it starts to wear off, right? It's like when you really get angry, when a coach gets really, they call it the hairdryer in Australia, when you really yell at the athletes, like that works really well once or twice a season. Other than that, it just becomes normal, right? So we do get desensitized to certain things like that. So you need to think about it. But there's certainly aspects of this that the best coaches know intrinsically with sports psychology. There's how do we get the best out of these people, right? So I'm another one. Like I probably race best in certain aspects when I'm really relaxed. But if not relaxed, it needs to be anger. Like there's a big driver for me. I tend to perform quite well on higher intensity stuff with anger, and I think most people probably do. So yeah, it's interesting. Where do you perform best? What do you need to be? Do you need to be happy? I think you need to be happy knowing you.
I think I had a big shift in my mindset over the year. Now I tend to enjoy more, long distance format where I can enjoy, just discover new things. So I need to be happy. I think in the past I needed to be, probably hungry, and it's probably a shift on how I see life and experience in life. Definitely, I need some happiness now in my running. It doesn't mean I'm not enjoying hard intensity. I also enjoy hard intensity, but it has to be linked to a team effort. Otherwise, it's very hard for me.
I think I can't find the research on this. I swore I read research around that sort of team effort and reductions in RPE, but from an experiential, anecdotal standpoint, I would say that there's no question that team efforts and those sort of things, reduce RPE and improve performance. I don't think it's really arguable.
Well, my research topic came from my experience as an athlete, not great athlete, but athlete still in cross country. And I remember being not on a super nice mood before starting, a bit depressed. And I remember having this motivation to run for the team that was kind of helping me to keep pushing despite feeling that I was reaching the ceiling of my perceived effort tolerance. And all this research came from this experience where I felt like, okay, can we measure what the maximal effort an athlete is willing to tolerate? How this is impacting the way they experiment the effort in terms of pleasure and displeasure, and how this is impacting their motivation. Is there a way to increase their motivation through team effort or pre-activation state or stuff like this? But I think no one is fixed on a mode, and it's definitely evolved over the year and over the experience.
I love that. That's a great place to end. Melissa, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you joining us on the podcast. We're going to reserve the right to invite you back when your study that's currently in press gets published, but also when you're onwards and upwards and working with the world's best, because I know you're already starting to do some of that.
Thank you, David. I think you waited probably for 2 or 3 years to get me on the podcast, so it was a pleasure for me to come.
Yeah, it was indeed a long time coming until you were ready, until you were happy, until you had some research you're willing to talk about. So we appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good chat with Melissa. I found that very interesting. Thanks for getting her on here, man.
Yeah, it was great. And, appreciate Melissa's time. And, listeners, hopefully you took something good from that, and there's some stuff for you to think about and enjoy there. And let us know what you thought. Of course, always willing to hear from you. DMs, emails, whatever you want to do. Strava comments, comments on Spotify, all of it's open. YouTube, all of it.
Before we get out of here, I don't think we have anyone in the doctor's office this week, so that's good news. Apart from some of those ACLs, I guess we did. Or maybe we can do a deeper dive on that at some point.
And the hamstrings. And the hamstrings from the race. There's actually, I saw a guy. There's a thing in the AFL, the Australian Rules Football, called the trainer, whatever. And this one poor guy ran out and tore both his hamstrings. I kid you not.
Oh,
it was like doctor or physio or something, ran out and tore.
What are the chances?
Very low. And anyway, I saw the club before. I saw them put out a thing of him in rehab and recovery. They showed some pictures and stuff. It was quite funny, like a bit of social media, like playfulness, which was cool to see. It's obviously just a bad day.
Can I ask you, I was watching Champions League football with one of the PSG players who was unbelievably fast. He looked like he pulled up his hamstring at a one sprint. He put his hand there, he stopped running, and then he was fine. And then he kept playing the rest of the game. Is there such a thing as almost tearing your hamstring, or he wasn't quite sure what he felt?
It could have been cramp, and he might have been scared that it was a torn hamstring. Or it could have been like a baby cramp. Might have been a very low-grade strain that he played through and then he's going to miss some time with that he doesn't know. It could just be him being worried, particularly if he's had one previously. Then every little thing you're a bit more sensitive to.
Yeah.
So could be any number of things. Hard to know though.
Yeah, he did that typical pull up, stop running, put your hand there, immediately start limping. And even the commentator was like, oh, he's gone. He's done it, yeah. And then he walked it off. And that was still in the first half, I think, and he played the whole 90 minutes. Anyway.
Well, on that effort alone, he wins the toughest footballer in the world.
Yeah, he's from Georgia. He's unbelievable. Kvaratskhelia. Very hard to pronounce his name. I've still yet to learn the pronunciation. Very bad. Let's get out of here. But before we do, what are we watching this weekend? I haven't even had time to think. It's Tuesday today, so I'm thinking about last weekend still. What I watched last weekend. What are you watching this weekend?
The big thing I'm excited about, I don't know if I'll be able to see this. I don't know if there is a stream, but Transvolcania, I think there is because I think I've watched it before. So big race across La Palma in Spain. Fields are amazing, including previous guest Peter Engdahl. So I'll definitely watch that. It's a pretty crazy race, lots of climbing, lots of wild weather. I think we talked about last year, Ruth Croft she was cold on the top of it. She got like almost hypothermic at the top of one of the mountains, had to come off. So poor thing. So anyway, I'll be watching that. That'll be the bit that I'm most excited about.
I'll be watching a little puppy who is between my legs, going crazy. You might have heard him making a noise for the last few episodes. Spencer Lauderberg asked me for photos. He was like, when are we seeing photos of this puppy? I think I finally posted it. But my wife is away for work, so I'll be looking after this puppy this weekend. And between that, I will watch the Volta a España Femenina, the women's Volta a España.
I saw Mariana Voss is in the doctor's office. She broke her collarbone.
Really? On one of the stages? I missed
yesterday's stage, Monday stage.
Okay, because I watched it in the first stage. I hope she recovers. Yeah, shout out to Ashley Mompasio, the South African. She's back. She's been fighting to get back to the top and back in the top 10 now. So hopefully she finishes strong. So I'll be watching that.
That's cool. Exciting.
Right. If you are still listening at this part of the episode and you have not shared or subscribed to this podcast yet, please do so now. We really, really appreciate that. We drop a new episode every single Friday. David, thanks so much for putting this together.
Thank you, mate. Talk to you soon.
Catch you on the next one.